It says recording.
Yes, it does say recording. Dennis, thank you so much for visiting with me. I appreciate the chance to chat with you.
Thank you.
Before we get started, could you tell us where you are in the world and how have you been dealing with the pandemic?
I'm in Paris, and I basically live here, and I'm stuck here, but that's fine because I like it here. Well, it's been interesting. We've done it differently over here than you guys. So, I mean, everything's been very clear and controlled, and we haven't had chaos. So it was very strict. For 2 months, we had to fill out a government form to leave my apartment, go anywhere, and it said what time you left and what you were doing, and so and it was very, very, very spooky here for a while.
Mm.
But now they've reopened, and you can go around, and there's no cafes or restaurants or museums or anything, and it actually feels very, very nice. I mean, it's almost starting to feel normal, because you just wash your hands and you stay, away from people, and you wear a mask when you go into certain places. And so right now it's such a relief to be able to be free.
Mm.
But it was, I mean, I stay home and work a lot anyway, so it wasn't hugely different, but it was hard not being able to see friends, and it was weird. And you?
Same, very much
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
I've actually appreciated the last couple of months to get some intensive writing done.
Yeah.
But the thought that it's a sort of enforced reading time as
Yeah.
opposed to a more freely chosen one does become
Yeah.
a little wearing. But
Yeah.
we do what we can to keep each other and ourselves safe at this time.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. I keep thinking of the phrase social distancing, and your work has sometimes been described as an aesthetics of distance.
That's true.
We might have a little bit more to say about that.
Okay.
As I mentioned to you before we get started, I've been a fan of your work for some time, and from your very earliest novels and poems, and you may be a prodigious writer, but you're maybe most famous for the George Miles cycle of books, and it's lovingly treated in Diarmaid Hester's critical biography of you, which is the occasion for our chat today. So, wrong. It's just
Oh, you have the book. I haven't seen the book yet.
Oh, you have it? Oh, it's a beautiful book. Really well done. I
Cool.
contacted the University of Iowa Press about a month ago to get a copy. I was eager to review it, and I believe it is the first single-authored full-length study of your work. You've had some other books with some marvelous essays in them about your work, but I think this is the first real lengthy study. I know you were likely involved in its production by being interviewed by Diarmaid and others, and so I won't ask you I'll resist the temptation to ask you what you think about the book, unless there's something you want to say. But I think it's marvelous. It's a really marvelous overview, not only of your work, but also of the particular cultural and historical situations in which you were writing. Let's go to the Beyond Baroque scene in LA and the punk music scene, but also tracing other influences. I was delighted to see the work of Paul Goodman spoken about so carefully and lovingly in the work. And the book also gives a great insight into your more recent work, the GIF novels and the films, which I definitely want to talk a little bit about. Needless to say, your work, as you yourself have talked about, your earliest influences, Rimbaud, de Sade, the filmmaker Robert Bresson, and I particularly want to talk about Bresson. That connection is not one I'd made before, but one I find incredibly rich. But first, a provocation. Your work is not really about representation, and I know that earlier in your career, people perhaps criticized some of your portrayals of what would one call it? Sadomasochistic sex, extreme sex, serial killers. You sort of criticized for maybe not towing the line and creating acceptable representations of gay life. But I've never understood your aesthetic goal as one of representation. Maybe.
No, it's not interesting. No, I mean, No, it's about communication. It's about creating something that it's about creating access points really for the things I want to convey, or I want to think about, what people to think about or feel or whatever, or explore. So it's really for me about yeah, I mean, if things are recognizable, and there are archetypes and there are things, and I do create characters that you're supposed to have some kind of engagement with, but I mean, I do think of the characters and stuff as being like just configurations, and the prose, I just think of them as being the most important, things. They're the characters are the things you can do the most with, but yeah, I don't, I've never, it's not ever supposed to be a depiction of a world that's real or a situation that's real. It's very much about, what happens privately in one's head, and then trying to find a way to get out of my head and into the head of the reader, and how to negotiate that, really. Yeah.
No, it's fascinating, and one of the things that I've been doing on this little hiatus is reading through the complete essays of Susan Sontag, is a marvelous writer, and I came across a phrase in her early work on style, in which she talks about art as really not about imitation, but really about the representation of forms of consciousness, and it kind of stuck with me that in a lot of ways what we get through your characters is these are less people, but they're explorations even of particular kinds of consciousness, and I wonder if that resonates with you as a phrase.
uh, sure. Absolutely. I mean, there are representations of aspects of my own consciousness.
Mm.
Just matter of like, I mean, some of the characters are very much more me, and some of them are people that are characters, or that I feel protective of, or I feel, I'm doing manipulating or doing things to. But I mean, sure. I mean, I never think about the word consciousness. I don't know. I just think about, I don't know what I think. I don't know if I even have a word for it, but it's because I'm always thinking about how to build it. That's the thing, is like, I have all this stuff, and it's like I have this endless reservoir of things that I really want to write about. So it's always, for me, it's like, and that stuff's so ingrained there, and I've been writing about and making work from that place for so long, that I really just think mostly about how to build it. And then the other stuff just kind of comes out, and I don't have to really think about it, except when I'm refining the things I'm writing. It's strange, but it's just, I've always needed to be in this kind of resource of my fears or fascinations and things, and all that, to make anything. That's kind of where I'm sort of stuck there. To if I didn't make stuff from that place, I would just feel like I'm just writing another book, and who gives a shit, and there's too many books anyway. It's like I have to feel like there's something that's absolutely just me, and that's why it exists, is because I need to get this thing out of me or something. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense. One of the things that's great about Dermot Hester's book is he resists kind of psychologizing and psychoanalytic interpretations about past trauma, or kind of obsessive relationships, whatnot. I think people have made those kinds of connections in the work, but he really turns our attention to issues of form, which I hear when you're talking about building a thing, making a thing. You're much more interested in the formal properties of a work of art. But
Yeah, for me, yeah. But I mean, like I said, it's not that stuff it's not about anything. It's not that it's like just structuralist work or something, but
right.
because that stuff is ultimately the most important thing. But it's like it's like how to place myself in that, because it's like my relationship to what I write about is very different now than it was when I was younger, or even 2 years ago. So it's like, where am I exactly now, and how do I build the proper form to identify exactly where I am in relationship to it right now. So that's why I keep changing my form all the time, because the forms I used before wouldn't work anymore.
It's fascinating. One of the things that Hester talks about at some length, and I think it's a really interesting thesis about your work, is that the tension of that content, the sometimes extreme circumstances or relationships that you are writing about, and then often that play with form, which is very much a part of your aesthetic, the builtness which even sometimes creates some distance between what you were writing about and then how it's written about. He says that in some ways represents the distance that we feel from each other and our desire to know each other. That's always in some ways foiled by an unknowability, an inability, really, ultimately, to know
sure.
each other. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Which makes a lot of sense. I am struck by the persistence of your vision around and work with young lives. Not only do you have young collaborators, but really young people have been one of the primary foci of your books, of your art for some time. In my relationship with the Los Angeles Review of Books, I'm actually the young adult and children's book editor, and spent a lot of time with young adult fiction. And it's been really interesting to revisit your work and think of it as a form of young adult fiction. In particular, since one of the things that fascinates and troubles me about so much contemporary young adult fiction is the brutality that it shows, the sort of the Hunger Games of YA dystopia, and the ways in which we brutalize our young people. And now we've turned that into a marketing niche in dystopic YA.
There's just endless amounts of objectification of young people in the work. It's just, most work, and it drives me crazy. I know it's like, I'd say it's, I think Diarmuid talks about in the book, it's just like, it's one of my great bones of contention or whatever, is that the disrespect and objectification is like a super great thing I don't like. I have a really hard time with it. I'm fascinated by it. I understand it. I'm susceptible to it like anybody, but you see it, like Hunger Games is a perfect example of just this fantasy of, wild youth and, and burning passions and naivete and all these things, and these things that are just laid upon these young characters. And it's pretty rare, it's pretty rare. I don't read a lot of young adult fiction. I do remember really liking S.E. Hinton when I was young. So I wonder if she maybe had some kind of connection with the material.
Possibly. It's an interesting thought. I hadn't considered it. I like it. I do remember some friends saying that when Hunger Games first came out, they really couldn't read it because they felt it was almost prurient in its savagery, depiction of savagery and the tortures of young people. One doesn't necessarily, I certainly don't feel that way about your work, because I think that unlike a lot of the YA, the aesthetic distance that you create through your stylistic play, your formal play, really is an invitation for thought more than anything else, and to really meditate on what does it mean that our culture consumes young people so voraciously.
That's the whole, that's the idea, is that it's because it doesn't take a stance, and it really forces the reader to locate themselves in the work. So and in relationship material, and it doesn't tell you what to do either, although I think there's if one there are people who I of course come across people who tell me how hot my work is and all this stuff. So I know that there are people who just absolutely can't get past, it's just like, if there are like hot teenagers, what they see as hot teenagers, it's like, that's all, they can't get beyond that. So that's interesting. But mostly it's not that. And of course, a lot of really young people really like my work, and relate to it and stuff. So that's very heartening. So.
Absolutely. There's an interesting way in which, I'm finding personally your writing even more relevant now than ever before, but I'm also finding the work of Robert Bresson more relevant than ever before. And I really want to talk about Permanent Green Light, the film that you did with Zac Farley. I very fortuitously watched back to back The Devil Probably and then Permanent Green Light, which was just an incredible 4 or 5 hours of viewing, because Permanent Green Light seems like such a love letter to Bresson's film.
It wasn't deliberately that way at all. It's like, I mean, in fact, I mean, other than certain principles that the Bresson used that we were using, I mean, we were trying not to be too Bresson, and because there are really, I mean, if you look at the, I mean, you saw them back to back, but I mean, there are these key differences. I mean, our film isn't mechanical, and it isn't like different things, but it is, you know, very reserved, and it does, you know, have natural sound and no sound that the characters can't hear, and the performances are all amateurish and done by people who aren't actors. But I mean, everything. I mean, it's just that I mean, my work is a kind of love letter to Bresson, always, but in a certain way. But it's because it's a film, you really see it much more clearly than you do in the novels. Although I think it's there too. So, but to me, you know, it's like, I mean, it's also me. It's like Zac, you know, is definitely, you know, half of it, and he likes Bresson, but that's not his God. I mean, he has other gods like James Benning and Chantal Ackerman and stuff. So that stuff is in there as well. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just I'm always very careful to say, like, but it's not like Bresson too, you know, because. But I mean, I can't deny it. And then of course the ending is, you know, yeah.
No, it's beautiful. I mean,
Yeah,
I
thanks.
actually find I find it very, very moving to see both films, not only back to back, but to kind of really think about the influence of Bresson on your own writing. Both of the films, as if people aren't aware, you know, deal with two young men who are pursuing their own. I don't want to call it death, because I don't think it's death, but their own sort of extinction, unbeing.
Well, except ours wants to create an amazing spectacle. I mean, his thing is much more. I mean, Bresson's is just like nihilism. You know, it's like, and ours. I don't think Roman, the character in our book, is nihilistic at all. I think he has all kinds of strange issues, for sure. But I think he really just doesn't think about it. He just thinks, for whatever strange reason, he just thinks, you know, I want to create this amazing thing that people will always remember, you know, and the only way I can do that is death. And then using my own death, it's like this, it gives it a power or whatever he feels like. So it's like, it's just about wanting to create this spectacle that will be like unforgettable, you know, like the way the guy who, the guy who fell on the roof and turned into a shadow was for him, you know?
Yeah.
So it's different in that sense, in the sense that I think Roman is really an idealist, you know, and he wants to leave something behind that's very powerful and will have a positive impact. I mean, he says in the film, you know, it's like, I want people to say, you know, thank you so much, whoever did this, you know, when he blows up. So in that sense, that's pretty different between the two. But yeah, they both have this mission to end their thing.
No, I completely get that. I would ask you a little bit about those key differences, because one of the things that Bresson does in his film, The Devil Probably, is links the sort of the steady move of Charles towards death with these images of ecological disaster and nuclear explosions. And while he doesn't comment, the filmmaker doesn't necessarily comment, the links invite people to make these kinds of connections. Your work, and not just in this film, but your work generally has avoided both political and psychologizing frames in ways. And in fact, what's interesting about Roman in Permanent Green Light is his pursuit seems more aesthetic than anything else. I mean, we see him drawing, and he's working with sound files and with what looks like a GIF as well in that film.
It's a GIF,
So it's intriguing to kind of think about those differences. Do you want to say anything about that? Because it's one of the most consistent and fascinating dimensions of your work, that sort of refusal to politicize or psychologize.
Well, it's a little hard to explain. I mean, it's just, I feel like that for the books to work, or for the film to work, you have to remove a great deal of things, because if you have to really make it a very myopic world. And the books are very much like that. I mean, you know, you'll be hard pressed to find very many women in my books, and that's because I felt like their entrance into the work would raise this kind of issue. It would raise these issues that would then propel outside the work. It was like the world needed to be airtight. So I felt it was important to remove everything that didn't allow that world to seem real or whatever to some degree, you know, and effective. So and it's the same with the film. It's like, you know, I mean, he's not engaged at all. I mean, there's these tiny points where you realize he knows about suicide bombers. I mean, it's just like, you know, at one point, because of the girls' interest in suicide bombing belts. And but I don't know, it's just like, you know, it's just like kind of making a meal or something. You know what to put in and what to leave out, and it's just instinctive, really. It's just like how tight. I mean, you know, we shot it in Cherbourg, which is this town on the sea in France, which I don't really like. And it's a port. It's like, it's all about being a port city. It's its identity. And we erased the port because we wanted it to be like a nothing. So the city has no identity at all. Even it seems to be exist for no reason, even though it's a very famous city for its port and its ocean. So I don't know, and I don't know why. It's just like it just feels like that needs to be done. I'm not sure. I don't have a list of things that I have to remember to erase. It's just kind of a sense of what's too much, you know.
Absolutely, and the
yeah.
paring down in some ways, as you describe it, that sort of removal, that paring down seems like such an important part of the work that you do. It really does focus attention on the singularity of the things you are describing. Singularity.
That's the hope. Yeah.
Singularity. Another word I take from Sontag, you know, who doesn't want us to think about art as generalizable, but as focusing our attention on the singularity.
No, I hate generalizations, so I'm like super extremely against them.
Do you want to say anything about what you're working on right now?
I finished a novel that comes out next year. So and that's actually about George Miles. It's like this novel I've always wanted to write about my actual relationship with George Miles and his as a real person and his real impact on me. I'm working on a new film with Zac. We're raising money for it, and I have a new gift novel coming out next month. And I got a bunch of different things I'm working on. I'm a kind of a workaholic, so I'm always working on lots of stuff.
What is the name of the gift novel coming out?
It's called Zac's Drug Binge.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it comes out next month. So yeah, but there's the good thing, and the galleries are sort of starting to want to show these things, and so I've had to go negotiate that because I don't think of them as visual. I think of them as fiction, and so I'm trying to figure that out because I like showing them in art spaces, and I had a show of them here in Paris, and it was very interesting. So I'm right now I'm trying to think about like can I continue that, and how do I make sure, because they want to sell it and you can't sell it because they're free, and can I make something where they could sell it? And I'm going through this whole thing about that right now, like how can I take the gift work into a thing where it would be something that you would see in a gallery, and I don't know.
So I'm definitely getting a sense of the trend: objectification, generalization, commodification.
Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah, I hate all that. Yeah. Well, I'm an anarchist, and my form of anarchism is very much the individual and not categories. And I don't like categories, and you know, I don't like any of that stuff. I mean, I don't even like collective identity stuff. So it's like I accept it, but it's like I don't like thinking about things and my own things and other people that way. I'm just like all about like, okay, here's a person who's a blank slate, and then I'm, let's say, another person, and I meet that person, and I assume they know more than I do, and then whatever age they are or whoever they are, and then they represent themselves to me, and then I accept that representation. And if I don't agree with it, then I use my instincts and my whatever perceptions to build on that. But the whole categorizing thing is just I don't know. I've always had this problem with it. It's like I feel like I don't want to have this thing, it's like, you know what I mean, where it's like you have this general understanding of who they are, and then it's like filling in the details. It's like I want them to be a blank, and then you know, it's like with the queer thing, it's like, you know, there are people who it's really important, that identity is really important to them, whether gender or race or anything. And that's, if it's important to them, it's important to me. That's as simple as that, you know. And but if it's not important to them, because I know plenty of people who just are like me, who are just like, yeah, whatever, you know, about that, then it isn't important. So I don't know. It's just one of my things that and it's in the work too. I mean, as you can tell. So
I think it was one of the things that struck me most as a young queer man, you know, coming across those early novels, Closer, Frisk, Try, and realizing, oh, this is somebody who really is challenging the way we conceptualize, even the way we conceptualize queerness and categorize queerness, and asking, how do we think beyond that? How do we live beyond that? First thing that you're going to do when the travel restrictions or the general place restrictions are removed, where are you hankering to go or hankering to do? Paris, beyond, etc.
Well, we can travel, and we can travel, you know, in Paris. To travel even in France, you need to get permission to go more than 100 kilometers. Well, I mean, as soon as they open the border between France and Germany, which will happen soon, Zach and I are both amusement park fanatics, and we want to go to our favorite amusement park, which is called Phantasialand. But the big trip that I've been trying to go to LA for a long time. I was supposed to go in June, because we want to maybe make the film there. We want to talk to a bunch of people there about it. And also there's a big show coming up in LA called Made in LA. Do you know that show? It's going to be at the Hammer.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, there's these, Zach's and my new film is about a home haunt, because we both are obsessed with home haunts too. So it's about a family that turns their house into a haunted house. And there are these young guys in LA called Twisted Experiential, and they're these teenagers, and they make haunted houses, and they're just fucking amazing. They're amazing kids, amazing haunted houses, and they're building a haunted house Made in LA that's based on Beyond Baroque. Do you know what Beyond Baroque is?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
So there's actually an Amy Gersler. So each room in the haunted house is themed around a writer from Beyond Baroque. So there's actually an Amy Gersler room.
Oh, I love it.
And a Dennis Cooper room, Bob Flanagan room, and I don't remember who else. And I really want to come see that, but they delayed that until September now because of, you know, the obvious reason. So anyway, coming to LA is probably the first big trip, other than just skipping over the border to Germany to go ride some roller coasters.
No, that sounds absolutely amazing, and I'm going to have to check out the Beyond Baroque house. By the way, Amy Gersler sends her greetings. She's been one of my colleagues here at UC Irvine, and wants to send her greetings and love. So
good. Well, I've seen her. She's like my oldest friend. So yeah.
One of my favorite colleagues. What will I do? You know, one of the things I was supposed to do just this past weekend was fly to Houston for the Francis Bacon late painting exhibition. I'm a huge fan of Francis Bacon's work, and curious resonances with your own work, although a very, very different aesthetic approach. And so unfortunately wasn't able to do that, but they've also extended their exhibition until the end of the summer. So hopefully I'll get a chance to go.
So it's actually open? The art shows are actually open now?
They just opened this past weekend. The Museum of Fine Arts in Houston just opened, and I got an email from them saying, you know, please come on. We're here. So I need to gauge my own feelings about flying at this.
Yeah.
But I really do miss galleries. I'm a huge art fan, and there's so many. There's a Catherine Opie exhibit in LA that I'm just dying to. And hopefully, as these things open up and the time frames are extended, we can take advantage of these things.
Yeah, it's the same here. The galleries are just starting to open here now, and all the museums are closed and will be probably for at least another month. It's because that's what I go see art all the time. I mean, that's like kind of one of the main things I do. So it's not been easy, and there's no movie theaters, of course, so I can't go see movies. And bookstores finally reopened. That was cool because that was tough.
Yeah. I think we're just on the verge of this. At least maybe in Orange County. LA might take a little bit longer.
Yeah.
What a real delight to chat with you.
Me too.
A chance to chat, and wish you the very best success with Diarmuid Hester's book, which I know people are really excited to read, and I look forward to you getting your copy.
Yeah, no, he said they're going to send me one. I'm in Paris, so that's the excuse. But yeah, it looks nice. It looks nice.
It's a very handsome book. There's no doubt about it. I appreciate it.
Cool.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so very much.
Not at all.